He's like my lowest, and cognitively, he's very, very, very low.
Well, and he would start out like he couldn't read. And I gave him the first word, and then you would keep reading the sentence. So there's also an effort piece there.
Yeah.
That his willingness to try.
I think our question was, if we're looking at the model of this is where we need him to be, here's midway, and then we're going midway between where he is and there for her, where do we find that balance that we're not affecting the other three that are obviously higher
So there was an
readers?
absolute difference between these two
Yes.
and those two.
Yes.
Completely different. Like those two could take off pretty fast.
Yeah.
And I'm guessing you could move them at a ridiculous rate.
And Niall can too when she pays attention, but she was
All over the
had
place.
an audience.
Yeah. And so,
She was
well, and she's also doing that when she reads. So even if she's reading the words, she's not monitoring her comprehension and making sure. So she absolutely needs to know what you're going to do after you read this. You're going to have to tell me what you just read. Or you're going to have to find the words that you were able to read or something to keep her focused and into the text. Yeah. And Malik. Well, the other thing she was doing is every time she saw an ST word, she put in students. Every ST word. So she has a bank of words that follow a pattern in her head. So again, they need to do so much reading that they break that pattern. Okay, and they start to see that the pattern, like so, or even she read system students. She read, what else was in there? States as students. So every time she saw ST or even S at the beginning, it was student. Well, student is probably a word she sees all the time, everywhere. So she associates the S. She's not looking at the entire word. So I'd give her a little mini lesson on looking at the full word. You know what I mean? All the way to the end. But they're getting into a level, and this is why third grade is they get into a level where they can't decode every word they come across, and most of the words they can't read are not, they're not going to be able to decode to figure them out. You know, easily. They can use their skills to start to attack it, but they have to be able to say what makes sense in a sentence. So they have to pay attention when they stumble on a word to go back and reread. But those two, with just prior knowledge, just before reading strategies, would be able to read everything. So if we get them spending a lot of time, what do you notice in a text before you read and make it a habit, then they're probably going to take off in their reading pretty fast. They just jump right into read, and then the words are so foreign and with no conceptual knowledge, but he was crazy.
He's got a lot of background knowledge. His mom does a lot, I think, with...
And his vocabulary, he has a good vocabulary knowledge, too.
If it's possible, I would almost separate those two from those two. Because you're absolutely right. Those two are going to hold those two up. Now, it doesn't mean that you couldn't give them two different, like at a table like this, have, yeah. I'd think about how you want to work that, because what you could do is have her do the pre-reading with them, the first read. So that when they come to the table with you, they've already read it once, and then they're reading it again. So they're going to be a little bit slower than these two. I'm wondering what would happen if you put these two in your next higher level up reading group.
Is this an O? Is that what this? I mean, like, where is it? Like, is it like a third grade on grade level?
It is the lower end of the Lexile band. It says a 500 to 600, so lower end of the third grade Lexile band. And so what I try to do when we say about using that grade level text, there is a band in that grade level. So that's where sometimes the Lexile helps over the level, because you can say, all right, within third grade, at least I know they're accessing third grade text. Start for these guys, I wouldn't do that. I would go higher. I'd give him even a higher. He was ready for a harder. I would keep him in grade level text, but get those pre-reading strategies under his belt. Like, just don't start reading. Actually look at what is it you're reading. If you can get them to answer the question, especially these two, is it a story or information? Might be the way you kind of access that. You're going to look at it, tell me everything you noticed. Is it a story or is it giving us information? Yeah. What other questions you have? What did you notice? And if anybody else has questions.
We were just questioning, I guess, time. So that took about 30 minutes.
Yeah,
And
so
do you
I kind
feel-
of ran 2 lessons into one so that you could see me take it all the way through to them reading. I
Okay.
wouldn't need to continue the reading. I could have just lived in that first paragraph. I mean, they ended up going down to the 3rd paragraph. Now, for time, these two probably could have gotten all that done in about 15 minutes. All right, so that was the difference in the slowdown. For these guys, I probably would have broken that first paragraph up even more to make sure they had the words. And so that's why I said they really are two separate groups, if it's at all possible to do that, because they're going to take a little more time, because you've got to make sure, the other thing is to make sure their eyeballs are on the words. Malik's were not all the time. Like, I had to keep putting him back. They're not going to be able to reread the word on their own if they weren't looking at it and reading it at the same time. Kind of think of stamping it on their brain.
Noticing, and because we experience that a lot in the primary where they're not tracking appropriately,
Yes.
and so giving them a pointer. But do you have any other suggestions for keeping their eyes on the
Stop.
word?
Like, stop reading and make their eyes. Like, do not continue if their eyes aren't on the text.
I saw you do that a couple times with Malik.
Yes. And even she would start to just run, and the longer she ran,
Yeah.
the more errors she was making in her reading. Like, she'd start out strong, reading beautifully, and then it's like you knew her mind was onto something else. So she needs to start tracking. When have you lost track, and just call it out. All right, you're off track. Let's get back on. Go back and reread. And eventually, when you've made her reread 17 times, she might also start to say, all right, I need to pay attention so I don't have to read it 17 times. But she's got to start paying attention when she's not paying attention, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So totally different issues, even for those two. So this one, I think he would grow if his eyes were on the text and tracking.
Yeah.
And that's what I would say is I don't care how they track it, but don't let them continue if they're not tracking it, because then they just turn into a whole ball of mess, like the longer it goes on.
So do you feel the intervention time could be done in a 15 to 20 minute period, or do you suggest a 30-minute session for intervention?
Well, if she's going to add the
I
decoding,
was going to say the other pieces.
the
too.
other pieces could
Yes.
take it to at least 30 minutes. But 15 minutes now, that's what at Pangborn, Ashley Beiser is doing. She's doing 15 minutes of this hardcore reading, eyeballs on the text. So here's the thing, is the more their eyeballs are on the text, the further they're going to grow. That is what you need. Everything else you're doing is going to help them, but the more amount of time, so much as you can extend that 15 minutes over time, there's a lot of other little pieces they need, like we just talked about, but get that eyeballs reading with you, on their own, then independent, but their eyes are always on the text. As soon as their eyes come up, they're no longer reading, okay? And so if you can even track that, and that's a great way to also track their progress. How long are her eyeballs on the text reading accurately before she looks up? Like, you can even start to track that in time to say, all right, we've got her now. Her goal might be you just need to keep your eyeballs on there and doing it and putting forth all your effort, and then noticing when she stops and telling her. Same with Malik. Like, your eyeballs are off. Put them back on the text. Where are you? Because then you notice he would also stop tracking. And I'm like, where's your pen? Put it back on track. I think it was Dick Ellington, whatever they call him, did the research on that, is that the biggest difference in reading is the amount of time eyeballs are on text. Those words. Does.
Well, and one of the things that's occurring to me too is let them know what you're working on with them. If tracking is something that you're working on with Malik, or you want to see eyeballs on the text, say, I noticed that you did that for 23 seconds yesterday, but today you lasted 30 seconds. So you're making progress in keeping your eyes on the words, so that they know that you're watching them doing that. So that might be helpful as well.
We make like a little chart they can track their.
They love doing that.
They love
They
charting.
love charting their progress.
And so you can, like, this was a hard text, so this is more like what you would be doing in the classroom. You can take it to an easier level, and you'll see even more success, and it won't take you as long. And that's where you'll see that real 15 minutes, because you walk through, when you notice it, you can also have them start paying attention to the print, like they notice the numbers. Like, I think if Malik got into this habit, he'd start to notice more of the words, because he had a lot of words there that he wasn't paying attention.
Tevin.
Tevin. You
Tevin.
mean? Yes.
Yeah.
Messing up. I'm
Once
really
he
great
knew
with
what he
names.
could look for. He said, "Oh, you mean-"
It's Friday.
Yeah. I don't think he probably doesn't recognize the other thing we were learning at Pangborn, and every group that I worked with, and I didn't ask this one, I forgot, but they actually don't realize that if they're not struggling to decode a word, they don't think they're reading. So he didn't pull out words he knew, because I don't think he realized that that was actually an ability. Like, and that's actually reading, is when you automatically recognize a word and just say it. Like, they actually think the process of reading is that very hard process where we have to decode everything we're looking at. Like, no, actually, that's what we're trying to get you out of doing. Like, reading is what he was just doing, and we want to tell him that. Reading is when you can automatically see a word and read it. And that's what we're trying to get to, is that you can see it and you can read it. Look at the text. What words can you automatically read without even having to decode? And that's what these two are ready to kind of look at. Yeah. And like I told you, start small. Like, just which things do you want to focus on? And if you really can just focus on putting that more difficult text in front of them, keeping their eyes on it. You, even with Malik, if he didn't have a word, I just gave it to him. And then hold him accountable for it after. What word did you read? Ask him to read it again. I think they say they own the word after 13 times. So that's why rereading and rereading and rereading again. Keep rereading this until they're nice and smooth, because then it can turn into their fluency passage.
So is this your
In time.
That's
That's
what
ready to
kind
ask
of-
them, like, how long is it that they need to?
Yeah. I mean, you don't want to bore them when you think that they're about done with this. Like right now, it's a highly engaging text to them. So like they wanted to keep reading and say, all right, now this time read it, and I want to hear smooth. And then as they've got the words, and say, pay attention to the comma and the but and the phrasing. You can get all sorts of lessons after you've gotten the words out of the way, but now you're using a grade level text to do that with them. And they're going to start to feel what it feels like to be a great reader. You know, and then hopefully what we'll see is as you're working on that with the harder level text, you're going to see the benefit before she does, because you're using a lower level text. So that's why you want to keep talking, because you keep doing it. And so sometimes what happens is you're going to feel more frustrated. You're like, I feel like I'm still doing the same thing. It's her that's going to see it first. When she starts putting that lower level text in front of them, I'll let you know. Yeah. And keep it with one you know they're going to be successful in, and then just slowly start to make it harder and harder and harder until you're closing the gap between the two of you. Yeah. It'll be fun.
Right, so if when we're talking about like exposure to text, like this is one text, so this is like your shared reading that you did today can turn into your fluency. So when you're talking about the read aloud and the guided reading piece and the independent reading piece, are there other?
I did the read aloud here too.
Oh, okay, so you're talking about it's not.
It doesn't have to be 18 different texts. Yeah.
Okay, it doesn't have to be 18 different texts.
So she's probably doing a read aloud in your class anyway with a different text.
Yeah,
At
not
other-
within at some point throughout. Yes.
And they hear that, right? So that's one text, and that's kind of what
Okay.
you wanted to look at.
So you're thinking
I
about
was
the
thinking-
doubling of what she's
Yeah.
doing, and like we
Yeah.
talked about the other day, the doubling the text. That's where you're
Yes.
thinking, right?
Yeah, I think that's what it was, and I think that's what I.
Oh,
That's
so,
what sometimes
so we
I
can
just need,
clarify.
like, a
Yeah,
I need
so clarify.
clarification.
It can be
It
a
is
different
one
text. It doesn't have to be a different text. Like for
Okay.
your purpose, like I read aloud and did a shared
Yeah.
reading,
Yeah.
and then did a guided reading,
Yes.
and then did an independent reading
Okay.
in 30 minutes
Right.
with the same text. Gradually release them to this
Mhm.
text.
And we just don't want them to get overwhelmed with
Right.
and kill the love of reading if they're seeing so many different things.
And that's where you guys
That was where I
monitor
was
that,
very
right?
confused,
Yeah, we talked
especially
about
because-
that
And you don't
yesterday.
want to bore them with only one text all day
Right.
either. So there's going to be a fine balance, and you'll know it. Like
Right.
the goal is as many different texts is great, but don't, like you said, overwhelm them.
I think that's when I was definitely confused, because when we talked about using a read aloud and using a reading aloud or a text at a level, let's say in this group at a level
Oh yeah.
M or whatever, but then we were talking about a shared reading would be about halfway after that, and then the guided reading was halfway. So
Okay.
that's where I was picturing all these different
Yeah.
texts.
So if you
and
look
how-
over the course of the week,
week.
your Monday read aloud
Mhm.
can be the same one you're going to do as a shared reading with them, like I did today.
Mhm.
So on Tuesday, you may introduce the next text they're going to use. You might do an overlap. Do you see what I mean? So
Mhm.
Tuesday, you could do a different read aloud with them
Okay.
and have
Because that
follow
would be
with
the
me,
next text that we're
track
getting
with
to.
me. That'll
Okay.
be the next. So you're kind of overlapping if you think about it that way. That also
Mhm.
can be how you play that game. It's your choice what works with them.
Okay.
And what works with you, what's manageable. Like you don't want to have 17 and try to
So
figure
you're
out.
back to the 5 and then 10. Like that's
Yes.
where my head went.
And that's where
Yeah.
that's where
That's
that's
exactly
where I think
where-
I was so confused.
Nothing
Yeah.
is a rule, okay? That's what we're saying is everything is like, okay, so that's like a goal, or that's if you think of that number in your head, it's not always going to be that way every day. It's going to be like, and so listen
Yes.
and let them kind of guide you into what they're ready for.
Okay.
And you know
yeah.
what good teaching looks like.
That's well, I feel
And you
like
just have both of you just have to
Yeah.
use your, I mean, you know.
And in fact, I
I was
have a couple
thinking
others I can
totally.
leave here with you because
Me
the
too.
classes I did
Okay.
at Pangborn are
So
just
just
slightly. So when I did some of the other classes, these are all sitting in the 3rd grade range, but highly interesting. So this is like Avalanche. You can go on and I don't have any
New
more
ZLA
color.
has good text too.
Yes.
You can break down by
New ZLA.
lifestyle and
Yeah.
skill set and
But if you need ones right away, it's fun. This one is how to survive. And the kids actually enjoyed that too because it's how to survive a sinking car, surviving a snake bite, bear facts. So they were highly
like
engaged in
that.
this one. And you actually have about a couple weeks right there
Mhm.
where each section could be. text. This is the avalanche with the car buried. Yeah, so they love it. So if you want those, you can use those too.
So then the
If
other
I look
question.
at it, let me see. Survive is a 560.
Mm-hmm.
Avalanche. Oh my goodness, no. Harriet Tubman was a 660. Yeah. Yeah. Avalanche is between the 5 and 600. So it'd be like very early, end of second grade, beginning of third grade level.
So then the other question I had, so these are all texts that we printed off of, gone online to find and all that. So what about
Little
I
books.
Mean, yes,
Yep.
I mean, so it's not.
Mix
we're not
it up.
just,
Yep,
so it can
mix
be
it up.
like that one is a longer text, but it could have been a book that also had the pictures and all that, so but we can break it up and spend more time on it because of it.
And then find an amazing independent reader.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if they like Henry and Mudge would be an easy level for them to read, and it's like a series of books. If they have that, they might enjoy Henry and Mudge.
One series, if you can get them hooked on the first book in the series,
Yes.
and they want to just keep reading the book in the series, if you can find that first book that they want.
Yeah. So that they also have something they easily read.
So then the independent reading part, because I know today there was the gradual release, and eventually they got to the point where they're reading on their own. But then when you're also talking about the independent reading part, bringing in the other text, other books, and allowing them that time.
So,
also
like, for
each
example,
day.
these two didn't take them very long to get to that independent read.
Right.
Say, okay, you're going to read this once on your own, and then you can move into your own independent
Okay.
reading. And that you can
Okay.
do that in the classroom too. When it's time to go to independent reading, read this text first, and then read your choice text. So it's like practice this one independently. So you can think of it as independent practice and independent reading.
Okay, so then another question. Things will keep popping in my
Where's
head.
your
That's fine.
You had
My
your
list, I know,
yeah.
that was a rambling list though. So you've got, all your different types of, what about a writing aspect of it? I mean, I know that because they do go hand in hand. So is there that component in this too?
What
that
I would do
you're
is
thinking,
let's
or-
start out by getting them solid at reading.
Mhm.
Because writing's going to be another bear. But when
Yep.
you can start to get them to talk about it, start first by asking the questions you want them to answer in writing.
Okay.
But have them answer them orally first.
Mhm.
And then do like a shared writing.
Mhm.
Let's write the response. Today I'm going to write what you say. So tell me again, what did you notice? What was most important?
Uh-huh.
I'm going to write it. Okay. Tomorrow you're going to write it when you read the next paragraph. And so do almost the identical thing. So that's going to take you, but I would take 5 to 7 minutes to start, not more than that. Because again, you're probably, if they're not pulled from writing or they are pulled from writing.
3 of the, Malik, Tevin, and Niall are pulled from writing.
Seamless.